Dawnbringer, Book 3, Chapter 4. Relihim on the Road. The morning light pours in warm and golden through a window facing east, and the particles in the air, caught by the light, glow. Tiliana, awakened by the warmth of this light falling upon her face, opens her eyes and rolls onto her side toward the light, watching the particles dance and swirl slowly in the air. She hears hushed conversation not far away, but makes no effort to listen. Rather, she lingers in the silence of night as it quickly fades away into the noise of day, a silence that hides terrors and fears that she now knows more than she ever has before, and yet also conceals wonders that are both deeply desired as well as elusive in their mystery. It is not that they are far away, esoteric, but rather that they are known and held, not in the way of possessive knowledge or control, but rather in the letting go of true surrender, in the poverty of open and empty hands and heart. This is what the true night means, the authentic silence, pervaded with light deeper than the darkness, with voice deeper than the silence, and security deeper than the fear. Tiliana has only tasted such, touched it as if in passing, with a brush of the tips of the fingers, or a call heard as if from a great distance. But one touch is enough, one whisper, and the heart is restless for more, but also more at rest than it has ever been. And thus she lingers, letting the stillness of rest hold her, rest following upon the terror that she had known in the lair of the Lord of Mares, and rest opened up by the Cymbalia who had pervaded her darkness with their light and her fear with the splendor of their song. But even as she rests, a repose precarious not in its own right, but in the frailty of her wounded heart, fear enters back into her spirit, and she recalls all of the pain, anguish, and loss, and the wounds, scoured deep into the very flesh of her heart, that cause her pain even still. Soon the clatter of pots and utensils and the smell of cooking food draws her out of the last vestiges of sleep, and she sits up. Her companions are seated around the table not far away, speaking with Uldren, while Drea works softly in the kitchen, preparing something that smells like bacon and porridge, and something else that Tiliana cannot identify. To her surprise, as she prepares to rise, she feels a surge of dread concerning the coming day. Fear and resistance to the struggle of living and striving, of walking long distances with little rest, and of facing in waking hours nightmares that belong only in the night, or not even there. Perhaps she is not healing from her wounds after all, but only sinking into the place where a person is haunted, both day and night alike. Has the horror of the Lord of Mares truly sunk so deep into her that it spread throughout her life like a poison through the body? She resolves to speak with someone about this soon, even today, though she knows not to whom to turn. At this thought, a small glimmer of solace enters her heart anew, and she smiles. Never before has she had this particular problem, for even if the darkness has immeasurably intensified, so too has the companionship of light. For never before has she had so many friends in whom she can trust, and to whom she can speak freely, without the fear of being hurt or misunderstood. In the crucible bonds are forged, and in the assault of darkness, bonds of pure light weave between souls like threads, uniting them together. She only hopes that she is not asked to endure the severance of those threads, the breaking of those bonds. This thought is more unwelcome than all the rest, and she almost wants to recoil into herself, to sever the threads by her own initiative, rather than to wait until some strife or circumstance breaks them beyond her control, causing her to undergo the anguish of loss that not long ago she was forced to endure at the deaths of her husband and her children. Trying to move beyond these thoughts, she rises to her feet and joins her companions. Soon the food is brought out and they begin to eat, their meal punctuated by quiet conversation, mainly Uldren's and Drea's answers to various questions concerning their village and way of life. Tiliana listens absent-mindedly to the flow of the conversation, and yet her thoughts are elsewhere, and before she realizes it, breakfast is concluded, and the others rise from the table, grabbing their dishes and bringing them into the kitchen. She too rises and seeks to help with the washing, but Elmarie lays her hand upon her shoulder and, with a knowing look, gestures to a couple chairs that still sit beside the hearth.
"Shall we sit together for a moment?"
she asks.
"Yes."
Tiliana replies.
"But what about the dishes?"
"Any more people, and we would be making the job harder, not easier."
And so they sit, the firelight playing upon their faces and offering welcome warmth to their bodies in anticipation of the coming cold that shall follow upon their departure.
"You look troubled, or at least distracted,"
says Elmarie softly, looking into Tiliana's eyes.
"I suppose that I am both,"
she replies after a moment of hesitation.
"I just ask myself, why am I on this journey? The rest of you have clear motives, vivid intentions. You are sacrificing yourselves for the good of Telmerion, taking up a yoke of fatigue, of daily vulnerability, of exhaustion, even of death, so that our people may again know the peace and security of the light. But as for myself, why do I accompany you? Is it simply because I feel like I have found a place of belonging? Because I seek to recreate the sense of home? That is not an adequate reason, is it? If that is my only motive, then I should have remained in Ristfand."
Elmarie listens and considers Tiliana's words before responding. When she speaks, she says,
"What you say echoes something true, and yet it is incomplete. For many people indeed take trials and struggles upon themselves, thinking that they have the best of motives, whereas they are driven not by altruism and authentic concern for others, but by the wounds and fears of the self, and by the desire to gain through their efforts. And you are right that none of us can walk this path with an eye to our own gain, or even to our own security. We are not here, even you are not here, to gain anything but to give everything so that others may know the light to the full. The light that in our time is so threatened by darkness. So far you speak the truth, but—"
Elmarie's voice fades into silence for a moment as she pauses to reflect, or perhaps to allow her words to linger and to sink into the mind and heart. Then she takes Tiliana's hand into her own and says,
"If one acts only in order to feel safe, to safeguard control and security, then one indeed acts in a way that shall hurt both oneself and others. But it is another matter entirely to receive the gratuitous gift of love that comes from the outside, and to find in this gift both solace and invitation. How else, indeed, can the frail human heart learn to love? To give generously without counting the cost, except from the gift of love that it has first received, and from the security that carries it, safe, held, and cherished, even in the deepest darkness and the most vulnerable exposure."
Their eyes interlock for a long moment, and Elmarie's gaze continues to communicate even when her voice has fallen silent. And then her words sound again, as if by way of conclusion.
And even the deepest and most total gift of the heart, of life, flows not into a void. No, it springs from love and returns to love, springs from belonging and returns to belonging, even if it passes through anguished darkness and agonizing loss. You see, the fact that you feel that you are here because you belong here is precisely the sign that you do belong here, with us, your friends and your family. Worry not overmuch about whatever gift may be summoned forth from your heart in coming times. You are here, and you are held. All else shall be as it must be, but that is the enduring reality, which shall remain when all else fades away.
The company departs in the late morning, their supplies generously replenished by their hosts, though still not enough to support them the remainder of their journey to the Velasi forest. Unlike in Ristfand and other towns in the far south near to the coast, this hamlet and others like it have suffered much greater losses in terms of harvests and even of animals raised for food. Though this particular village has not had a direct encounter with the Druidach, if rumours of their raiding are true, which the travellers doubt, it is nonetheless true that the wild beasts of mountain and wood have grown aggressive of late. Often the domesticated animals are slain in the night or taken away, leaving only hints of a struggle or thin trails of blood. It seems that irrational creatures, so intimately tied to the cosmic order, are influenced in their behavior also by the currents of darkness and evil that flow like a murky stream through the wider current of world history. This, at least, seems a reasonable explanation, barring the direct intervention of the forces of darkness who use such animals as their tools, as they do those despicable beasts moulded by their own wicked artifice. The sun shines now full in the sky, and the snow softens and begins to melt under its brilliant rays. This helps to ease the temperature for the travellers, but it also makes the journey down the steep slope from the mountains to the valley more difficult and perilous. And by the mid-afternoon, their boots and leggings are wet with moisture, and with every step their feet sink from a few inches to a foot into the snow. This greatly slows their progress. But looking below them, at the wide expanse of the valley of Teldin Pass, they see the greens and browns of grass and leaf, and know that the snow did not reach beyond the limit of the mountains and their elevation. But sight travels much faster than the body, and it takes them 2 days to reach the sprawling bottom of the valley, and another 3 days to cross its width to the southernmost feet of the Teldrin range. By this point, their provisions have almost entirely disappeared, and they have resorted again to hunting what little they can find and using it to the utmost, to boiling of bones for the nutrition that they and their marrow provide. By inspecting the lay of the land, they discern that their destination lies to the north and the east, in a wide dell enclosed on 3 sides within a ring of mountains, the only access being from the southeast. Syrian explains.
All the lore we possess tells of an uncrossable chasm that spans the distance from mountain to mountain, barring all entrance to the forest.
The Stiheka Mara, I have heard of it,
Says Eldarion.
If the tales are true, then should we not seek to descend upon the forest from another place, from the mountains?
If at all possible, I wish for us to take any road but that which leads through more mountains.
Rawlane comments.
We are exhausted as it is, from the road we have just travelled, and to all appearances, any passage through these mountains at least one that would draw us nearer to the forest we seek, would be without a road or even the narrowest of trails.
That could prove perilous indeed.
Tiliana agrees.
But I'm willing to take whatever road is necessary or most fitting.
Then I suggest that we travel to the Great Chasm.
Eldarion offers.
Perhaps we shall find nearby some point of access, some passage.
Or even just a path into the mountains from that point,
Adds Rorlane.
if such proves necessary. For there is clearly nothing here but steep slope or jagged cliff. It seems that almost anywhere will be better than here.
We shall see about that,
Syrian replies.
but I concur with your suggestions. Let us travel to the chasm and find what we may find.
How far is it from here?
Asks Elmarier.
Do we have any measure of the distance?
Considering that we do not know exactly where we are, that is difficult to gauge.
Eldarion answers.
But Teldin Pass is something like 30 leagues in length, and if the maps prove true, then the Velasi forest lies not far to the north of the easternmost entrance to the pass. So we should expect no more than a few days of travel, unless we have journeyed much further west than we thought.
The company travels 2 days to the east before they are halted in their journey by an unexpected encounter. The echoes of shouts of rage and screams of terror draw their gaze to the south, but at first they are unable to see anything, since a rise of land lies between them and the source of the sound. But when they draw to the crest of the hill and crouching down to conceal themselves, they look out over the pass. They see but 20 or 30 yards away a caravan of travelers waylaid by a band of Relihim. The latter, 10 in number, seem to have only just caught up with the travelers, being on foot, and one who looks to be their leader draws a blade from the sheath at his side and steps menacingly before the frontmost carriage. The horses leading it rear up with neighs of confusion, and the carriage slows to a halt, the two behind it doing the same. There are close upon 20 travelers in the caravan, and yet they appear to be unarmed, and many of them are elderly or women and children. Without another thought, Eldarion draws his sword and rises to his feet from their place of hiding.
Eldarion.
Elmarier says softly, reaching for the hem of his garment.
Worry not.
He replies, turning to her with a mixture of sadness and gentleness in his eyes. Then he takes a few broad steps forward and exposes himself fully to view.
Men of Telmerion.
He calls out in a loud voice, and all eyes of brigand and besieged both, startled and surprised, turn to him.
Why forsake the nobility of your fathers, and betray the blood that runs in your veins from the peoples of the past? Put away your arms, and cease with this madness, lest you come to grave harm. For the light of heaven shines not only to illumine righteous hearts, but to purge the hearts of the wicked and the unjust.
The leader of the group of Relihim takes a step in Eldarion's direction and laughs in a tone of mockery and spite. Then, with the eyes of the others expectantly upon him, he spits upon the ground.
And who might you be? Self-proclaimed savior, self-assured righteous man, and foolish intercessor?
I am none of these,
answers Eldarion.
I am simply a man from whom your kind took everything. Father, mother, sister, village, all alike were lost because of the madness of your malice.
Many could speak in such a way,
answers the man.
Though usually we leave at least a little behind. We don't wish to ruin the balance, do we?
I say it again.
Eldarion emphasizes, raising the Lightbringer before him in both of his hands.
Depart now.
Or what?
With this, Rorlane and Syrian also rise to their feet and stand on either side of Eldarion. Rorlane holds his bow at the ready, with an arrow nocked to the string. The leader of the brigands laughs again.
3 against 10. Is that how it is to be? Do you think you can defeat us and save these poor people?
There is a force we wield of which you know nothing.
Rorlane says.
You would do well not to underestimate this.
I think not,
the man replies.
Now I say again, who are you to claim to possess the light and to strike down those whose chosen way of life differs from your own?
You misunderstand us.
Eldarion answers, taking a few steps forward.
No, the light belongs to no one, and yet we all belong to it.
He raises his sword and adds,
And the days of darkness are ended. The light comes of its own accord and acts undimmed by even the blackest night.
What say you?
Says another of the brigands, drawing his sword also from its sheath. He says to their leader,
Come on, Gedrin, let's just kill them all and be done with it. What's with all of this chatter?
Those are perhaps the first wise words you have ever spoken.
The leader replies.
Let us do precisely thus.
His words are followed by the sound of all the brigands' weapons being drawn in unison. Without a moment's delay, Eldarion continues, raising his voice to be clearly heard by all.
Gedrin is your name. I say to you now, I cannot allow you to destroy the lives of these innocent men and women for your own personal gain.
And with this, brilliant light bursts forth from the blade held before him, light blindingly intense, pouring forth in the direction of the Relihim gathered around the carriage. Immediately the light is answered by the panicked cries of the men and the echo of their shouts to one another. Among the din are heard the words,
I cannot see. What is happening?
But how? What?
Comes the voice of another. When the brilliant light recedes, Eldarion now stands within 10 feet of the carriage, having walked forward, wielding the light as if drawn to do so by the very radiance pouring forth through him. He looks with eyes of sadness and pity upon the brigands and upon those who were waylaid by them, the faces of the latter showing both awe and fear, whereas the faces of the former show confusion, wrath, and terror. But the brigands' eyes look forth unseeing.
What have you done to us?
Asked their leader, his voice now trembling with a mixture of emotions that, whatever they be, have wholly replaced his previous confidence.
You are plunged now into the darkness that your hearts have long embraced.
Replies Eldarion, his voice strong and insistent, and yet also laced with compassion.
Go forth, and your lives shall be spared. In the blackness that has come upon you, let your heart open its eyes to see the horror of the path that you have chosen. I can only pray that you may find in this place the path back to the light.
The leader, after a moment of hesitation, says to his company,
This is a fight we should avoid. Come, men, let us retreat. Whatever devilry is at work here is best left alone.
Then with a din of confused voices, still conflicted among themselves, the brigands retreat, stumbling as if in a night with no stars or moon, not even turning back or stopping until they are hundreds of yards away. As their presence recedes, a wave of relief washes over all who still stand about the caravan, besieged and rescuers alike.
Who are you, and what have you just done?
Asks an elderly woman who sits at the front of the first carriage, a young girl enfolded in her arms and held close to her body. Both still tremble with fear, though their breath comes again like a deep sigh after prolonged suspense.
I am no one,
replies Eldarion.
Know only that you have been spared this day and go on your way.
So why and how did you take their sight?
Asks a young man nearby, stepping forward to look at Eldarion, wonder and curiosity in his eyes, but also discomfort.
It was not my intent exactly.
Eldarion answers,
The light pours forth and does what it wills, but their sight shall return in time, of this I am sure.
Then we must hurry on our way.
The same man cries,
It shall not be so quick as that,
explains Eldarion.
But it is true that you should continue on your way. These lands are not safe, and there are many dangers besides the one that you have just faced.
What is your destination?
Asks Rawlane, stepping to Eldarion's side and addressing the caravanners as a group. The other 3 companions are drawing near now as well, and the travellers, both sitting upon and gathered around the carriages, look upon them with relief and gratitude, though still with a bit of confusion as well.
We travelled to London, all of us.
Answers the elderly woman.
From whence do you hail?
Syrian asks.
We come from the towns and villages scattered throughout the eastern plains and hillsides.
But why travel west?
Rorlain asks.
It is dangerous on the other side of the mountains. You would be better off in the place from which you have come.
You really think so?
A man asks.
We were told that in Onilandun we would find refuge, for the war has not touched that city. Our own towns are besieged, and even our travel is now waylaid.
Your towns are besieged.
Eldarion questions.
By whom?
By the forces of the Empire and their minions.
No.
Telmerion sighs.
Why? And for what purpose?
She runs her hand through her long auburn hair, an expression of pain upon her face. The man looks at her and for a moment is at a loss for words before replying.
They seek to gather a great army, and those who resist are slain or captured. It is really hard to tell whether they wish us to fight for them or rather seek only an excuse to slaughter us. Our lives mean nothing to them. And those beasts, those despicable creatures that come in the night.
With this, as if he is simply unable to force himself to say more, his voice fades into nothing.
We know of what you speak,
says Syrian.
We come from Ristfand and were present during the siege of that city. You are fortunate to have escaped, though I fear little refuge shall await you in your new home. But perhaps there you shall find security yet, at least for a while.
And know that we intend to stave off this evil at its root.
Eldarion says, sheathing his sword again now and returning the scabbard to his back.
If I had not just witnessed with my own eyes what you have done,
says the man,
I would have scoffed at those words. But now I don't know.
Are you the one of whom they speak?
The woman asks.
They say that a warrior wielding a sword of light slew the commander of the dark forces. He is already becoming a legend and a hope for us throughout the lands of Rovus, though he disappeared as quickly and as mysteriously as he came.
Rorlain laughs softly and looks at Eldarion to see his reaction, but the latter only closes his eyes for a moment and lowers his head. When he looks up again, he says simply,
That was indeed something accomplished through the light entrusted to us, light which you have witnessed. Know that the gods see the plight of our people and are not indifferent to our suffering. Go on your way and take solace that this war is not yet lost and that hope of victory yet lives.
After exchanging a few more words and receiving the invitation to visit them in Onilandun if their path leads them hence, the 5 travellers depart again to the north, while the caravan travellers stir on their horses to the west, setting their sights anew on the city that awaits them. Onilandun is not far, only on the far end of the Telden Pass, and a short ride to the north, built into the steep walls of the mountains and hemmed about with protective ramparts of stone hewn from the same mountains. Perhaps it shall indeed provide some safety in the days to come, though this is uncertain.
How did you know what to do?
Rorlain asks Eldarion when they have walked for a while.
I did not know. I only felt a little and desired even more.
Replies Eldarion.
It was a risk, and yet I could not stand idly by while those innocent people lost both their possessions and likely their lives.
Of course not. I was just surprised, that is all.
As was I. I had no idea that the light could blind as well as give sight.
It blinds in order to give sight.
Interjects Elmarie.
But it cannot force. It is up to those men now whether they shall come to see or not.
Do you mean they may remain blind forever?
Rorlain asks.
No, I refer to the inner sight of the heart.
She explains.
I felt it too, that silent voice and invitation of which Eldarion speaks. It gives an intuition, an awareness of what awaits these men.
But what makes you say that darkness shall lead to the inner sight of the heart?
Asked Tiliana, entering the conversation.
Because that is the way it is for all of us.
Replies Elmarie simply.
as when the eye tries to look into a light too bright for its gaze, the sun, for example, or when the spirit confronts the evils of the past, the evils that indeed live in its very own depths. One must pass through darkness in order to discover the light.
I think we all know a little about that now.
Rorain sighs, scratching his beard thoughtfully and raising his eyes to the mountains before them.
We come near to our destination, and let us only hope that there is not too much darkness before we find the light that we seek.